"This bus isn't a parade float, old man. That uniform, or whatever rag you call it, isn't getting on here. Find another way." The bus driver's voice was loud and rough, like stones grinding together. His face was red, and his eyes were small and mean. Sergeant Thomas Miller stood on the curb, his old army uniform neat and pressed. It was a uniform he had worn with pride for many years, a uniform that had seen sun and storm, peace and war. Today, he wore it for a special reason. He was going to a reunion, a gathering of men who had served with him, men who were more like brothers than friends. Thomas was not a young man anymore. His hair was white, and lines of worry and wisdom were etched around his kind eyes. He looked at the bus driver, not with anger, but with a quiet surprise. He held his bus pass in his hand, a pass he used often. "Excuse me," Thomas said, his voice calm. "I have my pass. I need to get to the Veterans Hall on Elm Street." The driver, whose name tag read Ron, sneered. "I don't care where you need to go. People in costumes aren't allowed. Company policy." A few people waiting in line behind Thomas shifted uncomfortably. An elderly woman frowned. A young man listening to music pulled out an earbud. Thomas tried again. "This isn't a costume, sir. This is my uniform. I served my country in this uniform." His voice was steady, but inside, a familiar ache started to grow. It was the ache of being misunderstood, of being dismissed. Ron laughed, a short, barking sound. "Served your country? Sure you did. And I'm the King of England. Now move along." "You're holding up my schedule." He gestured dismissively with a thick hand. Thomas felt a flush creep up his neck. He wasn't used to being spoken to this way, not anymore. He had faced far worse than an angry bus driver in his life, but this public rudeness stung. He thought of the young men and women he had led, the sacrifices made. Did it all mean nothing now? "There must be some mistake," Thomas said, keeping his voice even. "Could you please check? Or perhaps I could speak to your supervisor." Ron's face got even redder. "Supervisor? You think I'm going to call my supervisor because some old guy in a dusty uniform wants to cause trouble? I am the supervisor on this bus. Now, are you going to move? Or do I have to make you move?" He leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. Thomas looked at the faces of the other passengers peering through the bus windows. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others watched with open curiosity. He felt a deep weariness settle over him. He didn't want a fight. He just wanted to get to his friends, to the place where he felt he belonged. He carried a small, worn satchel. Inside, among a few personal items, were his medals, not for show, but because they were part of him, part of his journey. He never boasted about them. Most people in his quiet neighborhood didn't even know about his past. He was just Mr. Miller, the polite older gentleman who always had a kind word. If you believe people who served deserve respect, not suspicion, wouldn't you agree this is wrong? Thomas thought this, but he didn't say it aloud. He simply took a small step back from the bus door. The bus driver smirked, thinking he had won. "That's better. Now, folks, let's get moving." He started to close the doors. Thomas felt a deep sadness. It wasn't just about him, it was about what the uniform stood for. He remembered a promise, a long-ago promise from a very important friend he had served with, someone who had gone on to do great things. "If you ever truly need anything, Sergeant, anything at all, you call this number." He hadn't thought of that number in years. He reached into his wallet, his fingers fumbling slightly. There, tucked behind an old photograph, was a faded piece of paper with a phone number on it. He hadn't looked at it in decades. He wasn't even sure if it would still work. Was this truly needing something? He was just trying to get to a reunion, but the disrespect, the public humiliation, it felt like something more. It felt like an attack on everything he and his comrades had stood for. He stepped further away from the bus, pulled out his old, simple cell phone, and dialed the number. His heart beat a little faster. What if no one answered? What if they told him he was bothering them? The bus, meanwhile, hadn't moved. The passengers inside were murmuring. Some were looking at Thomas with sympathy. The driver, Ron, was impatiently tapping his fingers on the wheel, occasionally glaring at Thomas through the mirror. The phone rang once, twice. Then, a calm, professional voice answered. "General Harrison's office, how may I help you?" Thomas cleared his throat. "My name is Thomas Miller, Sergeant Thomas Miller, retired. I was given this number a long time ago by the general. I am sorry to bother you, but I find myself in a difficult situation." His voice was quiet but firm. He explained briefly what had happened, not with anger, but with a simple statement of facts. He mentioned the bus number and his location. The person on the other end listened patiently. "Sergeant Miller, please hold for one moment, and thank you for your service." Thomas waited. The few minutes felt like an hour. The sun beat down on his shoulders. He saw Ron, the bus driver, say something to the passengers, probably complaining about the delay Thomas was causing. Some passengers were now looking at Thomas with open disapproval, swayed by the driver. Then the voice came back on the line. "Sergeant Miller, General Harrison is on his way to you personally. He says, and I quote, 'No one disrespects one of my men. He also says he's looking forward to seeing you at the reunion.'" Several other concerned parties from the City Transport Authority are also en route. "Please, just stay where you are. Help will be there in under 10 minutes. Thomas felt a wave of relief so strong it almost buckled his knees. He hadn't been forgotten. "Thank you," he whispered into the phone. "Thank you very much." He ended the call and stood a little straighter. He looked at the bus. Ron was now yelling something about calling the police if Thomas didn't leave the bus stop area, but Thomas didn't move. He just waited, his gaze fixed on the direction from which help would come. It was perhaps 5 or 6 minutes later. The air was tense. Some passengers on the bus were getting restless, asking the driver to just go. "Forget him." One man shouted, "Let's move." Suddenly, 2 black cars with official-looking emblems on the doors pulled up swiftly to the curb, parking just behind the bus. A third, a transit authority supervisor's vehicle, screeched to a halt in front of it, effectively blocking it in. The doors of the first car opened, and out stepped a tall, imposing man in a civilian suit, but he moved with unmistakable military bearing. His silver hair was cut short, and his eyes were sharp and intelligent. This was General Harrison. Behind him, 2 aides, also in suits, emerged. Ron, the bus driver, watched this arrival, his jaw dropping. His ruddy face began to lose its color. He looked from the expensive cars to Thomas, then back to the men getting out. What was happening? Who was this old man? General Harrison strode directly to Thomas. He didn't shout, he didn't make a scene. He simply extended his hand. "Sergeant Miller, Thomas, it's been too long." His voice was warm, full of genuine respect. Thomas took the offered hand. "General, sir, I didn't expect you to come yourself." "Nonsense, Thomas," the general said, his eyes briefly scanning Thomas's uniform with approval. "When one of my best needs assistance, I come. Now, what seems to be the problem here?" He turned his cool gaze towards the bus. From the transit authority vehicle, a flustered-looking man in a supervisor's jacket hurried out, adjusting his tie. He saw General Harrison, a man he vaguely recognized from news articles as a prominent city figure and a decorated war hero, and his eyes widened. He then saw Thomas in his uniform standing calmly beside the general. The supervisor, a Mr. Henderson, rushed towards them. "General Harrison, is there a problem here, sir?" He was already sweating. Ron, the bus driver, finally found his voice, though it was now shaky and uncertain. He was trying to get on the bus without he was causing a disturbance, sir." He pointed a trembling finger at Thomas. General Harrison looked at Ron, his expression hardening. He was causing a disturbance. Sergeant Thomas Miller, a decorated hero of this nation, was causing a disturbance by trying to board a public bus in the uniform he bled in for this country. Ron stammered, I didn't know. He just looked. The uniform is old." The general's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp. "This uniform, driver, is a testament to service and sacrifice. It has more honor in one thread than you've shown in your entire demeanor today. Did you identify yourself, Sergeant?" he asked Thomas gently. "I tried, sir," Thomas said quietly. "He said it was a costume and company policy didn't allow it." Mr. Henderson, the transit supervisor, looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him. "Driver?" he said, his voice tight with anger and embarrassment. "Is this true? Did you refuse service to this gentleman and insult his uniform?" Ron's face was now a pale, sickly green. I thought, the rules. We have rules about..." The rules, General Harrison interrupted, his voice dangerously low, do not include bigotry and disrespect towards veterans. This man, Sergeant Thomas Miller, holds the Medal of Honor. He saved countless lives, including mine, many years ago. He is on his way to a ceremony where he is the guest of honor. A gasp went through the passengers still on the bus. Many were now pressed against the windows watching the drama unfold. The Medal of Honor. They looked at Thomas with new eyes, seeing not just an old man in an old uniform, but a true hero. Ron stared, aghast. Medal of Honor. He had threatened to call the police on a Medal of Honor recipient. He felt sick. I didn't know, he whispered, his bravado completely gone. Oh goodness, I didn't know. Mr. Henderson stepped forward. Sergeant Miller, on behalf of the City Transit Authority, I offer our deepest, most sincere apologies for the absolutely disgraceful treatment you have received from this employee. This is not what we stand for. This is not how we operate. He turned to Ron. You, hand me your badge and your route key. You are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. And I can assure you, the outcome of that investigation will not be in your favor. Ron fumbled with his badge, his hands shaking so much he could barely unclip it. He handed it over, his eyes downcast, avoiding the horrified stares of his passengers and the icy glare of General Harrison. Now, Sergeant Miller. Mr. Henderson continued, his tone much softer. Please, allow me to personally escort you to the Veterans Hall. It would be an honor. We will ensure you arrive with the respect you deserve. But before Thomas could reply, something else happened. The doors of the bus hissed open. An elderly woman, the one who had frowned earlier, stood in the doorway. We're not going anywhere with him, she said, pointing at where Ron had been sitting. Her voice was surprisingly strong. Then the young man who had been listening to music stood beside her. Yeah, what he did was wrong. We saw it all. We're getting off. One by one, the passengers began to file off the bus. We're boycotting this route if he's driving, someone declared. This man is a hero. Another added, looking at Thomas with awe. Within minutes, the bus was empty. All the passengers stood on the sidewalk, a silent, powerful protest against the injustice they had witnessed. They stood with Thomas. It had been barely 12 minutes since Thomas had made that crucial phone call. 12 minutes that changed everything. Ron, who had been escorted to the side by another transit official who had arrived, watched this happen, his face ashen. He had not just lost his job, he had lost the respect of every single person there. He had made a terrible mistake, judging a man by his simple appearance and an old uniform, never imagining the giant who stood within. General Harrison put a comforting hand on Thomas's shoulder. You see, Thomas, people do remember, people do care. Thomas looked at the crowd of supportive faces. He saw the passengers who had chosen to stand up for him. He felt a warmth spread through his chest, chasing away the earlier chill of humiliation. Yes, sir, he said, a small smile finally touching his lips. I see. Mr. Henderson, the supervisor, looked overwhelmed but also determined. We will arrange alternative transport for all these passengers immediately. And Sergeant Miller, your ride awaits. He gestured to one of an official car. Thomas was escorted to the car, not as a problem, but as a man of immense honor. General Harrison got in beside him. As they pulled away, Thomas looked back at the empty bus and the crowd of people who had stood by him. It was a sight he would not soon forget. The story of the bus driver and the quiet veteran spread like wildfire through the City Transit Authority. New training programs were immediately implemented, focusing on respect, dignity, and special considerations for veterans and seniors. Ron was, as expected, dismissed from his job. He had to attend sensitivity training and issue a formal written apology to Sergeant Miller, though Thomas never asked for one. Thomas arrived at the Veterans Hall a little late, but his entrance, flanked by General Harrison, was met with a standing ovation. His brothers-in-arms, already aware of what had transpired, welcomed him with even greater warmth and respect. The indignity he suffered had, in a strange way, highlighted the very honor they were all there to celebrate. Thomas Miller never sought recognition. He was a humble man, content with his quiet life. But that day he was reminded that sometimes, standing up for oneself, even in a small way, could make a big difference. It could remind people of values easily forgotten. respect for those who served, kindness to strangers, and the courage to speak out against unfairness. He continued to live his life with quiet dignity, but things were a little different. People in his neighborhood, who learned the story, looked at him with new admiration. The bus company offered him free travel for life, though he politely declined, preferring to pay his way like everyone else. The lesson of that day echoed far beyond the bus stop. It taught many that heroes don't always wear shining armor or announce their presence with trumpets. Sometimes they wear old, faded uniforms and carry their greatness quietly in their hearts, and they deserve our respect, always. If you believe that those who have served their country deserve our unwavering support and gratitude, remember Thomas Miller. Remember that a little respect goes a long way, and judging someone by their appearance can lead to missing the hero standing right in front of you. True honor is not in the newness of the cloth, but in the courage of the soul that wears it.